Hi, I'm Trimmer Beeftone. Somewhere, it's a time on a clock, and that means this week's That's My Crow. On the show that's happening right now, he's been exploding Allens everywhere, speaking about video games and sharing insights and giggles aplenty. It's Explosive Allens, Dan Maher.
Hi!
Welcome to the show, Dan.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Dan, which Allen has been your favorite to explode?
Alan Titchmarsh.
A good choice. And a Manchester United fan, suffering silence. And in the orange corner, it's the most Cheshire cat. It's the Tsar of Red Leicester. It's our Ginger's cookie in the pack, and on the rack, our defending champion, Mr. Patrick Stardust.
Hello.
So let's get started on this week's That's My Crow. 15 questions over 3 rounds. 15, also the name of Godzilla's favorite child. Round 1, it's the Demons round. Give me sparkly, give twinkly me. Of the options below, say what you believe to be twinkly or sparkly. As ever, my decision will be final, and I will be marking you on this clipboard with a brand new big rollable pen. Big, more brill than a quill. Gentlemen, are you ready?
I am. Yeah.
Then we'll begin. Remember, twinkly or sparkly. Twinkly or sparkly. Sherbert.
Sparkly.
Glass.
Twinkly.
Politics.
Ooh. Twinkly.
Salt.
Sparkly.
5 golden rings.
Twinkly.
Round 2, the dark round. You, give me warm. Give me soft. Warm or soft? Warm or soft? Adjudicated with big rollerballs for writing, not for your balls. Duvets.
Warm. Soft. No, warm.
Cake.
If it's fresh, if it's fresh out of the oven, it's warm and soft.
Strangers.
Soft.
Motor vehicles.
Warm.
Aluminum.
Warm. Soft.
Final round. Dark aparted you. You give me smooth. Yes, you give me silky. Silky or smooth. Silky or smooth. Marked with a big rollable pen, like a finger that ink comes out of. Mashed potatoes.
Smooth.
Margarine.
Silky.
Silk.
Smooth.
Smooth jazz.
Silky. Silky smooth.
Leprechauns.
Sexy. Is that an option?
I totted up the scores, and it's a whitewash for Dan Maher. Round of applause, please.
All right. Yeah.
Any words to say regarding your victory, Dan?
I deserve this.
And Patrick, thanks for watching, and we'll see you again on That's My Crow.
Boo.
That's My Crow is a Tony Blair production. Right, so Dan, thank you very much for joining us.
That's all right.
It's been a long journey to Dark Souls for yourself, wasn't it?
It was a very long journey, yes. One of multiple false starts. Yeah, and what finally turned me round to it was I'd obviously been following a lot of people like yourselves on Twitter who worship the game, as you clearly do. But I got away on holiday, and I met a friend of a friend, basically, and we sat down, and he was basically on his 8th playthrough, I think. And over the course of a very boozy evening, he basically sold me utterly on the Dark Souls experience and convinced me to go back to it. And so I did go back to it.
So how many of the false starts had there been sort of beforehand? Is it one that you kind of nibbled
3.
on? Yeah?
Ooh, 3.
And how far had you gotten each time, and what was the barrier that was pushing you on to other things? Was it sort of just different games, or no time, or just didn't seem like your bag?
First time, I think it was because I went Graveyard Wood instead of up the hill.
Oh, right, yeah.
I just thought, come on, don't be ridiculous. And the second time, oh god, I think I'd kind of cracked that, and I got to, what's the name of the boss on the bridge, the first kind of boss on the bridge?
Taurus. The Taurus demon.
Yeah.
Is it the Taurus demon, the first one on the bridge? Yeah, that one. And at that point, so yeah, it was a combination of things. So it was basically because I was losing to him. I hadn't been paying attention. I wasn't climbing up the ladder and taking out the archers and doing the diving attack and everything you're supposed to do. And then I think the third time was pretty much the same point. I just an idle kind of wander back and go, what was I so bothered about last? Oh yeah, it's this fucking shit. Yeah, so I decided what I'd do is the next time I went back, I would start completely from scratch, knowing what I knew about character builds, and just paying more attention. And if I'm being honest, I used a walkthrough of sorts, but nothing that kind of ruined it from Dark Souls is one of these games where you can use a walkthrough, and that's still no guarantee of any sort of success.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it was more like, because I am starved for time, but I was desperate to get through it, I thought, at least if I am going in the right direction, the right direction at all times, at least that's not going to be contributing to my inevitable frustrations elsewhere.
So you got this guy that you met on holiday. You got sort of his words ringing in your ears, or had that been filtered out with wobbly pop a little bit? Just
wobbly
like,
pop,
wobbly
pop on the evening.
Yeah, you just like, Dark Souls is really good. It's like,
Dark Souls
get back
is
to that.
very, very good, and then it's like Britney Spears' Toxic kind of bleeds. Dark Souls really is the taste of a poison paradise. It's,
It is in Blacktown.
It's in Blacktown. It truly is. Britney Spears, wise beyond her years. She,
I've now got visions of walking through Blacktown and those wobbly sort of platforms and stuff, and just like, your toxic love.
In a red latex onesie, yeah.
Whatever you play the game down, that's fine with me.
Spears with the body of a spider at the end.
That would work.
Queelag Britney. Oh, that would be like an unexpected musical finale.
And the game just segues nicely into Quailag's dance beat.
The daughter of Chaos just starts singing "Slave for You." It would be
Yeah, so, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's all right.
Tangenting with bizarres between the lot of us. So yeah,
so that's it. She said, like, yeah, his words did resonate with me. I think it's because he told me more than I'd really kind of heard about the game before, which was more with regard to joining the different factions and how that affected the game you had. So that really interested me, because I always knew that it obviously had this really kind of revolutionary PvP mechanic, and its always online nature was always a great source of kind of fascination stroke terror for me. But yeah, he kind of allayed my fears in that regard and really showed me that you can kind of become master of your own destiny and choose, how and when humans kind of interfere with your game to a degree.
Yeah. I mean, when I first played through did my debut Dark Souls playthrough, I didn't really know much about the Covenants at all. I thought they'd missed a bit of a trick, because in Demon Souls, when you went hollow, you lost quite a large chunk of your health. So it seemed prudent to be human. But when I first played through, I was like, well, there's no real difference being human other than being invaded. And it was only much later that I realised that there were NPCs that you miss entirely if you're not human. And it was really my second playthrough where I kind of went in, having watched a few playthroughs, and went, all right.
Oh, so like Kirk, for example, is that his name? The
Kirk, Knight of Thorns, yeah.
Yes, the ongoing invader, stuff like that. Yeah, stuff that can be so easily missed. And that's really what sucked me into Dark Souls, because I'd had such a good time with Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate on the Wii U, and a lot of that enjoyment was really down to the community that built around it, and the kind of number of unspoken tricks and secrets that game had, and the fact that you only really got to the core of that game once you started talking to other players and cooperating, and you'd see little tricks and you'd be like, oh, hang on, how the hell did you do that? And I was like, It's been so long since I've played a game that is just riddled with these kind of secrets. And then I went back to Dark Souls and realized, oh my god, this is exactly the same kind of game.
This is made for me.
It's just loaded with discovery and rewards, and it just in every corner. It's just such an intelligently thought out, laid out puzzle box of a game.
But I know that, yeah, because you on YouTube you did a Pointy's View, Dark Souls: The Lost Art of Keeping a Secret.
Yes.
Which almost seemed like a degree of self-therapy as you tried to unravel why you love the game, and not just the game itself, but games in general. It seemed to go a little bit deeper than that. And with you saying about going the graveyard route at first on this, I remember on the Pointy's View you mentioned that there was a little inkling of ghosts and goblins in there, and I thought, I hadn't really thought about that for the graveyard bit either.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and especially in terms of the challenge as well. Like, there are parallels to those two games. I don't know if it's really said, but I mean, fundamentally, Dark Souls is really part of the Metroidvania genre. You've got this huge, expansive map, which is very hard to access initially, but you gradually unlock various shortcuts and routes that kind of shrink the map, not literally, but in terms of the way that you get around it, which is exactly what Metroid in those games was always about. In this case, it's done in a much more subtle and far less telegraphed way. Obviously with Metroid it was like, here is a pink door, you need missiles to open those doors kind of thing, whereas there's a raft of items that take you places, and not all the time is it really conveyed to you in any kind of in any kind of like clear way. For example, getting into the painted world, for example, like how the fuck did anyone work that out?
Yeah. But what did you make of the world? Because I hadn't thought about it in the Metroidvania style, but I can completely see that. But what did you make to it with regards to not only its structure but its design as well?
Its design is phenomenal. The way I liken it is when I play a lot of fantasy games. I'm not a big fan of high fantasy. I'm not the kind of medieval tinged fantasy, things like I watch Game of Thrones, I love that, but things like Skyrim, games like that, I just can't get into, because I get very bothered by how straight-faced it all is and how lacking in character it is, and there's just something that doesn't grip me. And yet with Dark Souls, they seem to have taken so much inspiration from kind of classic European art and architecture and design. There are moments when I'm like walking along castles and things where I just feel like this is not entirely dissimilar to when I've gone to visit a real castle, or I've gone to visit a real forest.
Yeah.
And it does so much within its limitations in terms of just conveying raw atmosphere and ambience, and really kind of evoking real feelings that I've had when I've been to places, which is what a lot of games fail miserably on. There's people look at Dark Souls and go, well, that's quite limited, whereas I think they have basically just made expert use of a relatively limited palette to deliver, scenes of absolute wonder. Like when you first get to Anor Londo, for example,
Oh
and you
my.
just look, and you know what I mean. That's still. I've got my PS4. I had my PS4. I got my Xbox One. Still saw that and was like, oh my god, that is just an absolutely stunning vista. That's art. That's the difference between throwing loads of polys and textures at something and true craftsmanship and true art. Yeah. And Dark Souls world is one that is just riddled with moments like that, where everything is considered as a scene. Even the one that always struck me as being beautiful is when you get into the forest, and at the end there's the secret wall with the bonfire.
Yeah.
And the way that bonfire, kind of the light of that licks on the wall, is just such a beautifully framed scene. Even though it's in real time, it's absolutely gorgeous, and it's just full of those moments you just kind of stop for a moment and just take it in and drink it in, and yeah, love it.
I know. One of the things that continues to resonate with me is the fact of how much research they've done before they then brought that research to imagination and put it into the game. Like I know they said that Madrid Cathedral was the influence on the structures of Anor Londo. And one of the designers looked up at the buttress and was like, "I'd like to run across that."
And so you can, that's it. I think that's just a wonderful way to go about it. I think taking your inspiration from real life sources and then. But that's it. You've kind of hit the nail on the head there when he said, "I want to run across that buttress." He's taking things that you thought yourself when you see these things, and you want that sense like you get to see these things as a tourist, and you get to see them on a very kind of surface level. When really what you want to do is be kind of barreling around them, exploring them, and really getting to know them. And that's what Dark Souls does with this world. And I think it links it all together in such an expertly seamless way that people don't really. I don't think some people really appreciate just how good it is until you kind of play through it and you go, oh, hang on, I was just in this massive cathedral building and now I'm over in this forest and now I'm in this city, and somehow they've managed to tie it all together so it feels natural and it feels seamless, but you find yourselves in such a variety of places in a relatively kind of small space.
I think the advantage of having it being quite technically a small space is you can see other places from everywhere. Like, first time you get to Anor Londo, you can look up and to the left and you can see the Duke's Archives up there. It's like, oh, that's kind of cool. I wonder if I can get there. Yeah. And then you do. And you're like, oh, cool. And like, I think CJ, you were saying once someone had died in Izalith, gone up to the Tomb of the Giants, looked down, and they could see their bloodstain.
Yeah, they could see the souls that they'd left there. They were glowing in the distance, so it wasn't just a regular backdrop that was plugged on there. It was the game in the distance, and that's one of those things that makes it feel like a real world. And obviously, the more you play through the game, the more the characters become resonant, and you start looking at descriptions and tying certain things together, and that makes you want to explore it in itself. But even within a playthrough where you're not looking for those things, and the game doesn't force its story on you at all. You can love the game for itself, but the world is fascinating.
Yeah, and as you say, a lot of the story is really left for the player to piece together. I mean, you can assume so much from what you're reading, as you say, from various object descriptions, and even just when you're in the loading screens, when it's just showing you various items and it's kind of giving you a little bit of lore that's attached to those items.
Yeah.
You start to kind of build a picture of the relationships between characters and monsters and everything else that kind of occupies that world. So, yeah, it's just a very fully formed, fully realized vision of, when they put it together, it's everything has place and purpose and meaning, and I much prefer that. I much prefer that to a world that's expansive for the sake of expansive. So it's a bullet point on the back of a box. Oh, you've got 100 miles of world to explore and fuck all to do in 90 miles squared of it. Whereas Dark Souls is loaded. There isn't a wasted bit of real estate in that game, basically.
Even to the point where the places you find things are important. Like, you find a particular armor set somewhere, you think, well, how did that get there? That's
Oh
from
God,
that
yeah.
person's from over there. Why is that hit? What? And like it starts barreling them. I think, why is one of those down here?
One of those that really sunk in for me a long time sort of afterwards was, you were talking about Kirk, Knight of Thorns early on, and the place that he invades, and he's an invader that you kill, and then the place that you find his armor is near the near catatonic sort of spider system, and with her covenant you feed her humanity. And you realise that actually Kirk was invading to kill people to get the humanity to keep her alive.
Yeah.
And it's one of those...
Genius, isn't it?
It just sinks in later and you think, you've not made this obvious. And I think this is one of the reasons why the fan base is so passionate, why it's so entertaining to watch lore videos and playthroughs and just get together and do that playground mentality and go like, oh my God, and there's this, and there's this. And rather than making this big song and dance about everything that's there, they're content to hide these things away, and they're really chuffed that people might or might not get near them.
Yeah, I mean, imagine how rewarding that is from the developer's standpoint as well, is that people are taking the time and effort to find these things rather than kind of dismissing it at face value. I mean, as a creator, that must be the biggest kind of compliment you can be paid, to be honest.
But isn't this one of the reasons why the game has continued to sort of build a fan base, and even within those moments where there's nothing new coming out, people have gone, oh, I might give that Dark Souls a go. Oh, I've heard it's really hard, but it's only a $5 on Steam, or it's only £4 this week on Xbox Live. And a few people, I think, have been surprised at getting beyond that brutally difficult bullet point and actually finding themselves knee-deep in something that they can't quite equate to why they're enjoying it so much.
Yeah, and the thing is the more that you progress with it, the more you realise that the tag that's attached to it in terms of its difficulty is unfortunate in a way, because it's a challenging game, and it's challenging in a kind of in a very fair way most of the time, but it's also challenging in an old-fashioned way, and I love that, because it's almost like we've become so accustomed to all the crutches and stabilizers that so many games have given us these days, that when you're faced with something that does put up a bit of a fight back, you're like, oh, holy shit, it's like, I've actually got to think, I've actually got to, I'm not just kind of blindly kind of bashing my way through and getting to the end and getting my achievement at the end, and, that's my kind of, my prize, my kind of, monkey presses button, monkey gets food kind of process. It's far more rewarding than that, and I think people like me who've still got like stacks of games to play, that's why you return to it, because if a game is 3 years old and people are still talking about it with such reverence and people are still playing through it, there's got to be something magical there. There has to be something there, because there are so many games, MMORPGs aside, I mean, how many games can you name that people are still that evangelical about that many years on?
I mean, especially with the online component as well, because outside of, maybe your Battlefields and your Call of Duties, most games get about a month at most, and then their online dies. But people were still pitching in. I mean, I've seen some of the PvP videos, and I have no idea how these people are doing what they're doing. It's just beyond my skill set.
Some curious kind of wizard.
To see people swapping out rings mid battle, I'm like, you're running along with a menu up and you're swapping things out and still focusing on the screen. What kind of human are you? And can I have a cutting?
Well, there's people that can play through the entirety of Ikaruga playing both ships. So it's, check that video out. That's hardcore. So yeah, it never surprises me that there's always people. It's like that guy who does the whole run through, kind of glitching through the entire game in about 40 minutes flat, doesn't he? I think. Just mind blowing how people break games and how people just see through the matrix, as it were. They kind of see where they can do it, and I felt clever when I learned I could roll off a staircase or whatever and just shave 5 seconds off my inevitable run back to the tourist demon. And it's just a natural extension of that. People just keep learning shortcuts and they just become more and more efficient.
But isn't it great that the game gives you so many ways to play it?
Yeah.
I mean, I've said before, I am not the greatest gamer in the world by any means, but the fact that I can approach a challenge in my own way, and if it's not working, there's no preset developer difficulty or skill set to get there. I can go, right, well, I'll try a different weapon, or I might need to, if I go with a strength, I might need to level up a little bit for that. It just asks you to think.
Yeah. And it's more, it's in a much more meaningful way than games usually try and tackle that. You know, this isn't a game that sings and shouts about, oh, you've got different moral paths and oh, you've got all these options, but it presents so many more options in so many different ways without even making a song and dance about it. So many games use it as such a blunt tool, and this game really gets it. I mean, even RPGs to a degree are very kind of stat-led, and so your decisions aren't necessarily driven by your heart, they're driven by maths.
Making the numbers bigger.
Yeah, making the numbers bigger. And obviously Dark Souls has an element of the numbers game, but it's also about feel and you know, weird things like heft. Oh, what's the heft of my weapon? You know, it's just what feels right for me, what has the kind of ideal moveset. It's, for me, as a big action gamer, you know, someone who kind of loves Platinum's games and Devil May Cry and games like that, to see that kind of consideration applied to a game that's so much more slow and deliberate and thoughtful so expertly is really what turned me around to it. I realised that maybe it was a change of pace was required for me. Monster Hunter was the first game to teach me that lesson. You know, you try and wade in and play like Onimusha. No, and you know, and Dark Souls is very much along those lines. And I think maybe it's me becoming an old man as well, but I appreciate it, and it's got a little bit more kind of weight and thought and depth to it as well.
What you're saying about the difficulty as well, and the fact that the game, there is this feeling that the world is out to do you in.
Yeah.
I think rather than running headlong towards your next cutscene, even the moments of silence in the game are loaded because you're thinking, what's coming?
Yeah.
And the longer that there's that degree of pause, and pacing is wonderful in games when done correctly, and I don't think it's done with a degree of nuance very often.
No.
But that feeling of dread when you can quite easily run through an area, but you're just slightly pushing on the analog stick just to go one footstep. One footstep.
It's that point where you become, after your first mimic, you then doubt every single chest you see. Until the end of time, you look at it and
oh my god. Every chest now I hit is like, that chest is in for it. Yeah, and amazing. And like, that's it. It makes you a cautious person. It's a game that's built around trial and error, but not in an unnecessary way, in a way that's like, oh, I've learned a lesson. This is a game where death is a lesson. You kind of go through this Groundhog Day-like experience, and it's exactly what Bill Murray does in Groundhog Day. Every time he dies, he learns a little bit more, and he learns a little bit more, and the lesson grows. And, you know, Dark Souls is very much the Groundhog Day of gaming.
Well, the stamina level, I think, is very interesting with regards to what you can get away with regards to swings, and also all the time you're thinking, can I protect myself? And I constantly get this sort of flicker book when I'm playing between caution, i.e. sticking my shield up and going like, don't go near him, right, maybe next time, look for that move. And those moments where you go, fuck it! You just like jump in and you're like slashing like an idiot, and then you sort of jump out the way. I got away with that! Or there's this, you know, you're saying sort of Monster Hunter as well has those huge moments where you do something, which it almost feels like it's just pressing some long lost button of Primal Man where you're like, ah! Screaming at the sunrise.
I have had enough of you!
No, precisely that, and I just love that feeling, the kind of heart racing feeling that game creates, because it's very rare that I'll play a single player game and when I beat a boss, my heart is racing at the same pace that it would be had I just had an incredibly tight game of Street Fighter 4 or something like that. Like there's very few games that generate that. Like, I'm not a big football fan, but I always say, like, something like FIFA, the biggest triumph of FIFA, even if you're not a football fan, is that once you get into it, its capacity to make your heart absolutely fucking race, where at the critical moments is like unparalleled. Street Fighter 4 makes my hands like shake uncontrollably because the adrenaline rush hits you when you're in it. When you game, that's when the adrenaline rush comes. You're like, shit. And like Dark Souls like that, it's like filled with these moments of panic. Fuck, I forgot to change over from my pyromancy back to my shield, and I've accidentally just lobbed a fireball into the ether and taken an axe to the face. All these moments of like blind panic and trying to kind of keep your nerves in check while actually trying to attack these situations with the kind of strategy and kind of level-headedness that they need to kind of be overcome. Case in point, the Four Kings battle. I had to think very carefully about that because my weapon of choice, foolishly, was what's it called? It's the life something scythe.
Life hunt scythe.
Yeah. So I was using the halberd, and I basically clicked with the halberd. I absolutely clicked with it, and I was like, I got to 10. It was like, oh, do you want to upgrade it with one of the boss souls? I was like, oh, finally a chance to do that. and it was the life hunt side. I was like, this is an interesting little, what do they say in Eurogamer all the time? A wrinkle. What an interesting wrinkle to the gameplay this is. And you know what? I persevered, and I pretty much used the life hunt scythe right to the bitter end after that because I did, and that ongoing threat of blood loss, man, that makes you fight like an absolute tactician, like brutal. And with the Four Kings, all it was having a shitload of blood red moss, hacking away up to the point that you almost kind of max it out, and then basically kind of switching to pyromancy, using the blood red, lobbing a fireball, and then getting your scythe back in gear. Because I mean, that thing is brutally powerful when you get it up there. It's just making sure that you don't just kill yourself through vast amounts of blood loss through a stray hit. So it's like, not only do you have your energy bar and your stamina bar to worry about, you've basically got a weapon that's kind of got a like when you use like a chain gun in a Call of Duty game and it overheats. And then it suddenly steams, and you have to wait for a long cooldown period. That's what the life hunt side is. It's like the chain gun of Dark Souls. You've got to kind of get it up there without overheating it, otherwise you're fucked. So people was like, "What? You use?" I'm like, "Yeah, I use the big, plodding, blood-sapping, ridiculous weapon and finished the game on it." So
it's cool. I've not used that at all. I don't think I've even sort of looked into it. So you see, this is the sort of daft thing that people have conversations and go, oh, I haven't used that, and then you're like, right, I'm going to make sure I upgrade that on my next run.
Yeah,
and you end up starting the game again, and it is a fun game to start again.
Oh, it is. Well, especially after the first time, because for you to be maxed out and to start back in the Undead Asylum, you're like, oh yes, here we go. And it's like, I know everything's like twice as nails now, but at least I'm decked out. I've got my Havel armor and a fucking huge scythe now. So let's see how we get on.
Oh yeah, that first quarter of New Game Plus is just retribution.
Oh yeah, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing. But yeah, that was it. And it's great. What it does brilliantly is you finish the game and immediately it's like, start again. It's not even like, do you want to start New Game Plus? It's like, there you go.
Yeah,
you're like,
you go.
Okay. And you're like, yeah. And I did that. And then I realized, like, fuck, I've been doing this with the primary aim of starting Dark Souls 2 in kind of, in good conscience, getting on Dark Souls 2. And so I kind of did my bit and, wreaked havoc for as long as I could, and then jumped over to Dark Souls 2. So I'm only a couple of hours into that at the moment. But I'll be interested to know how you think it compares, because one of the criticisms I've read from the core fans is that when you encounter bosses, that what we've discussed before, that sense of the kind of invisible narrative, isn't quite there with Dark Souls 2. It feels like the placement is far more like there's a boss because there's a boss there, rather than there's a kind of a story behind this happening.
Yeah, I know they've increased the number of bosses in there as well, but it's been difficult playing Dark Souls 2 because I've really enjoyed it, and some areas more than others. But I know that when I was playing Dark Souls, I was comparing it to Demon Souls, and it was on each subsequent playthrough that I ended up loving Dark Souls more and more and more. And I still can't decide which between Dark and Demons I love more, because I just genuinely adore those worlds and the sense of design.
Week,
I think they're more apples and oranges than than they're given credit for. But which is why I can't really be harsh on Dark Souls 2 yet, because I'm doing the initial playthrough where in Dark Souls I just played the game and enjoyed the world, and sort of everything was new and scary, and I haven't got my fingernails into the lore yet, and as I understand it, the start of New Game Plus has brand new enemies that are harder than the last boss in the game. And
yeah, I've heard that. I've been panicking. I don't want to push the New Game Plus button yet.
Yeah.
It allows you to choose when you start it as well. Like, you finish the game and it pops you back into Majula, and you can just go around and finish off all the shit you missed.
So yeah, I'm happy that I've got it, and I feel honoured that I'm back in these worlds and everything seems scary and new again. But the overriding feeling I'm getting at the moment is that, and it's possibly because Miyazaki's not there, is there's a little bit of magic that's missing.
That's the feeling I got. Anyway, sorry, go on.
Yeah, I'm actually coming at this the other direction. It's kind of at least the first half of the game has been possibly a little bit more special for me this time.
Really?
And that's simply because, I came to Demons and Dark quite fucking late. Like, by the time I came to Demons, Dark was already out. And again, I kind of bounced off it a couple of times before I finally got into it and, clicked with it. And then pumped straight into Dark afterwards. But again, Dark had been out for ages at that point, and like all the mysteries, well, not all the mysteries, but a large portion of them were all, fair knowledge. I knew that there'd be someone called Ornstein and Smo and that they were shitlords. I knew there'd be 4 kings and they'd be arseholes. Like, I knew there were some things coming. I knew about Praise the Sun. Whereas this time, where I got the game a little early for review, and I was, sort of playing it by myself, offline, no messages, no summons to help, no wikis at all. Like, it was just me against the world with no help whatsoever. And it was, I don't know, I got a better feeling off it just because I was finding it all out. I was working things out. I worked out you could shoot the Pashir with a fucking ballista. I worked that out. And it felt great, and it worked the first time as well, and I couldn't make it work ever again from that point on. But
is that the room with the 5 ballistas, or is this another bit?
Oh, God,
it's a different bit.
It's another bit. Ignore that. But there were no little signs. Like, there's a couple of bits later in the game where there's a couple of really obvious things you can do, and I walked straight past them, and my life was hell because of it. Utter hell. It's like not knowing that you had to put on the Abyss Covenant ring to jump into the 4 Kings. It's like that. It's like that level of you idiot. And then when you
it's like taking off the Abyss Covenant ring once you're down there, because you think, well, I don't need that now. Yes. I'm in the Abyss, and I'm gonna protect my. Oh shit, no.
Yeah.
I mean, it's often I kind of try and look on the other side of it and just say, am I putting on the Miyazaki button because it's there and because I know he's not involved? But I can still see moments in the game where it's taken my breath away. Like the first point that I walked through those caverns and I got to Majula and I saw that sunrise and I saw the tranquil ocean and just that beautiful piece of music that plays overhead, and I genuinely felt emotional. And I felt safe, and I just, it stopped me in my tracks, and I just wanted to breathe it in. And games too rarely do that.
Yeah, I think they do. I think they very rarely stop to give an area a personality. And it's
outside of this area is going to kill you.
Mm. Yeah, exactly. And it's like every area in Dark Souls 1 is a character. Everyone knows what they represent in terms of the game. They're a character unto themselves, and it's very important, especially with something like Medulla and obviously Firelink Shrine in Dark Souls, that that you associate it with that feeling of sanctuary. I don't think the music lives up to that beautiful kind of melancholic lament of Firelink Shrine. That's just such an incredible piece of music. Yeah. And the load music isn't as good either, when you load your game. Because I always think of, when I load my game in Dark Souls, it always reminds me of the music in Resident Evil 2 when you find a typewriter room.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you find that, and it's always like, this is you're safe here. Nothing can get you in this room, kind of thing. And it always evokes that for me.
With you saying about music as well, going back to what you were saying about that moment where you first see Anne Orlando, the point where you're lifted up and you're then put down, and you see that incredible sunrise over those spires, and you're lowered down. The music does that. And it just syncs with the moment entirely, and as your heart races as you see that sunrise, you're suddenly lowered into the moment, and the music's done it, and then you've got that boo, as it announces the name of the place, and even the words sort of make you go, Anne Orlando.
Yeah, you get a little bit of a shiver, don't you?
Yeah, and situationally as well. I'm always intrigued by Dark Souls, the way that it plays with your senses. Like Four Kings, for example, fighting in absolute darkness, no floors, no walls, no ceilings, nothing there. Crystal Caverns, you're essentially walking on air. How often did you walk across those, and you've got like a little knot in your stomach, and you feel like you're formed on the sofa, sort of sitting on the edge, almost as if you'd fall off at the same time if you missed that next step, and then you notice the little things like the snow falling on,
or messages left halfway along.
Yes, exactly. They're always the giveaways, aren't they? Yeah, that's actually like that leap of faith stuff is so brutal, but it's like it's always fair because it gives you the visual clues. You just have to pay attention. I tweeted when I did the Four Kings battle that the biggest enemy in that fight is perspective, because because they're massive, but because you've got no kind of point of reference apart from your own body, it's really hard to know like what the hit range is and things.
Yeah, it's like really horrifying episode.
Very cleverly.
Yeah, it's a horrifying episode of Father Ted. Is that king small, or is he far away?
Far away.
The one that got me with that was Demon Souls on World 5.1 and 5.2, where there are creatures that you can't quite tell if they're close to you and they're small, or if they're huge things and they're a little bit further away, and when one of them just starts running from distance and you realise it's massive, and you hear the boom, 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 you're like, what? And the way that the level's constructed, it just looks like a Jenga set that's fallen. It's like a shanty town that's covered in blood, that's just toppled, and wherever the wood and the planks and the monsters have landed is where they are, and it could collapse at any moment. That, to me, is making me tense even before I start playing it. And you don't need little gimmicks firing off everywhere if you're that centered in the middle of the screen. Like, you can blur the world and the room away and turn the sound up, and you're listening for every single last that might be around the corner, and that's an old Resident Evil thing as well.
Yeah, it's exactly. Looking at every single plank on the floor, because there'll be the one that you step on that's in just a random place. It's not like when things break, they're not like, oh, this entire bridge is going to break now. It'll just be a couple of planks because you were an idiot and you walked over them, and then you doubt every step you take. You're like, is that going to break? Can I walk there? There's a shiny there. That looks like a trap. Should I go there? And you end up kind of getting into a weird sort of neurotic bag of nerves, unable to walk forward because you're scared you're going to fall through a hole in the floor that isn't there.
Isn't that amazing though, when games can do that to you, when it can feel like almost that it's your own life that's on the line, and
it's manipulating you.
Yeah.
It's like a good filmmaker knows how to toy with a viewer's emotions. A good games maker knows how to toy with a player's emotions. And you're surprised after you've kind of played something like Dark Souls how few games actually pay any heed to that, actually thinking about what the player's going to be feeling at any moment. And introducing that constant sense of trepidation and dread, but making sure to carefully kind of offset it with the kind of euphoria that comes when you've done something right is just such an expert balance. It's that constant, peaks and troughs that game excels at, really.
I think it's always interesting as well that even throughout that and all of these, these different factors that the world's throwing at you and the game's throwing at you, it's never less than fun. It's not difficult to control. It's instinctive to control, and it's not. It doesn't ever feel like it's being pedantic with you, or it's the game feels like it's better than you.
Yeah,
if you fuck up, to pay attention.
Yeah, if you fuck up,
it has rules. The game has rules, and those rules don't conform necessarily to any game you've played, but they're its own rules. It has its idiosyncrasies, but that's what makes it Dark Souls. You've got to learn the slightly weird control layout. You go from playing one game where X is, as ever, the action button, to then flailing around trying to remember what the attack button is and parry and whatever on Dark Souls, and then remembering item management and all that kind of side of it. It's got its own very tight rule book, and as long as you kind of play by that rule book, you're going to be all right.
Pay attention, idiot.
Yeah, exactly. Pay attention. It's about paying attention and getting you to actually kind of lean forward as you play again. You've been talking about Demon Souls. That's a good game I've got a copy of as well. Does it seem more surmountable? Would it seem more surmountable to me now that I've kind of conquered Dark Souls?
Yeah, I think so. I think that if there's something that I really love about Demon Souls, which I kind of miss with the way that Dark Souls progressed, is that you seem more committed to each swing that you make, because it feels the controls feel more weighted on your character. So rather than it being sort of almost like an arcade-ish sort of type of swing when you swing the sword, everything seems like you're following through with the body in it, and it feels like if you've got a moment to strike, you're waiting for that moment to strike, and you're gambling everything on that swing, because there's more heft to it, and I quite liked that. It just felt more dangerous, I guess. But I
think that's why I enjoyed the heavier weapons in Dark Souls, for that exact reason.
Yeah.
With a halberd or a scythe, if you miss the swing, you kind of stumble a little bit because you've missed that swing. So your reward is when you get the hit, you actually remove that extra those extra kind of recovery frames. I'm going to fighting game territory now. You lose the recovery frames when you nail the hit, and if you miss it, it's like swing and a miss. And obviously, you would lose your footing if you do that, and you don't find your target.
That to me again is realism meeting imagination, because it's you as a person in that world with physical limitations, but surrounded by a rule book that's thrown out. And I love that. That's my favourite thing entirely. Not the Christopher Nolan thing where you're trying to make everything realistic, but there's a million plot holes that he just manages to avoid. It's like, thrill the life out of me, please, but don't ever try and make it realistic.
Definitely, I like that. I mean, Christopher Nolan doesn't avoid plot holes; he just steams right through them.
Yeah, I'm not a fan.
It's his superpower.
You could go spelunking in his plot holes. So yeah, I mean, it's curious because I've started Dark Souls 2, and it's kind of more with an eye on actually making another. We did this video series called "We Need to Talk About It." So I'm playing Dark Souls 2 because I want to, but I've also got this desire to kind of go back to Demon Souls now and give that another fair crack. I did beat the first. God, if I'm thinking back now, I'm pretty sure I beat the first boss on it. And if I recall, is it the same creature that you see in... I'm trying to remember where it is. It might be in the Painted World, actually.
The Phalanx.
The Phalanx, yeah.
Sort of, yeah. It's similar. Very, very similar.
Yeah, the Phalanx, yeah, that's it.
I think
soul-farming Phalanx, amazing.
Amoebas with shields on.
Yeah.
I think if you go back to Demons, I mean, obviously, technically, it's not to today's modern sort of whiz-bangery, if you will, but the sense of design is absolutely astonishing. And I'll tell you what, give me that every day of the week over photorealistic.
Yeah, always.
It's very much got its own palette, and the world feels dangerous. It feels like there are battles that have gone on for years and years before you got there, and there are. I think it'll terrify you, but I'll be very, very curious to see what you think.
Maybe we could do another show months down the line when I've kind of tried to get through those two as well. see
I love that.
how I got on with those. Yeah, I mean, it's what's interesting is when I used to work at Sony, we used to do these things. I think they used to call them the trilateral. They gave them a fancier name than that, but basically, every 3 months or so, the European, American, and Japanese Sony teams would get together in one of their home locations. So you go to the States for one, and then you go to Japan, then you go to they come to the UK for another, and they'd invite people to come along, people who were pitching for like Sony exclusives, or they wanted to show a game off and they wanted to get Sony to kind of sign a deal with them. Obviously, like Namco used to have a lot of games published exclusively on PlayStation, stuff like that. I used to do a lot of Namco stuff, and yeah, from Software were there, and they showed off Demon's Souls. God, this must have been maybe 2 years before it came out. And it was they were talking about it in a very conceptual fashion, and if you can imagine. This is 2006, 2007 maybe, that these guys are coming at you and saying, okay, we've got this idea for a game where you explore this really difficult trap-filled dungeon, but when you die, you can leave messages for other players and leave bloodstains, and people can see how you died, and it helps them get through. And also, if you die, then you are, it's in your interest to go and hunt other players to regain your humanity. And, considering what the online game space was like back then, I just had literally no faith in the idea. I was like, this is so crazily ambitious that there's no way they can pull this off.
Sounds like you even explain that. How would you even vaguely explain that? And yet it seems now, further on, because I was never an online gamer at all. I just wasn't my
Me neither.
bag.
And it sounded like such a resolutely single-player experience. I was just like, how are you going to guarantee that all these people are going to be online at the same time? How are you going to guarantee that any of this works? Isn't it possible for a player to get stuck because there's nobody else online to help them or to kill or what? All these questions. And it was all kind of it was a PowerPoint presentation I'd kind of printed out, and then they left us with code, and it was a linear demo. It wasn't it wasn't the game in any shape or form as it exists now. It was really just showing the function of it and how the world would look. And even at that time, it looked beautiful at the time, to be honest, because you were this knight in gleaming armor, and you were going along this landscape, and you had to fight a few basic enemies, and then it kind of ended on this gigantic dragon, and kind of faded to black. I think you either had to fight the dragon, or we just kind of did that classic "coming soon" kind of message at the end of it. And I think, unfortunately for me, because that demo didn't really convey any of that stuff happening in real time, because it had to be kind of baked into the demo to show it. I still kind of remained unconvinced. And Sony Japan signed it exclusively, and that's why it was a PS3 exclusive. But it wasn't published by Sony over here. But did Namco publish Demon's Souls as well?
No, wait, didn't Atlas?
I think Yosh at Sony was saying that he didn't really have any faith in Demon's Souls at the start, because the point that he'd seen it was a bit jittery and it hadn't come together at the end. But as I understand it, it came out to not the greatest reviews in Japan, but word of mouth went round and it started selling out. Word started filtering over to the West, and people started importing it and then talking about it. Atlas signed the deal for it in the States, and it did stunning numbers for Atlas. And obviously the profits from that they can put into lots of other niche stuff that might not have normally come over. But still, at that point, even when it was getting all the really big review scores and it was selling really well, Sony didn't want to publish it in Europe. And that's when Namco stepped in and published it in Europe, and clearly just went, there's something cracking off here, we're going to have a bit of faith in it.
That was possibly my fault. It was not my fault. But I mean, I was in that kind of realm at the time where those decisions were being made, and a lot of the time it falls to PR and product managers and us. And one of my ongoing tasks was to look at games that had come from Japan and kind of evaluate them. I didn't get to evaluate Demon's Souls in full, unfortunately. I got stuff like Bleach games and things like that, and it was like, well, nobody outside of a very select group of people watch Bleach in the UK, so the likelihood that people are going to buy a pretty poor game based on Bleach as well is minimal. So the only game I there were two games that I said we should have published that weren't. And one was it was a vanillaware game, Odin Sphere. Have you heard of the game Dragon's Crown?
Oh god, we've heard of Odin Sphere. Oh yeah.
Yeah, Odin Sphere. So we had that, and I was like, this is the end of the PS2's lifespan. This is an incredible looking game, and even if you upscale it on a PS3, it looks fucking phenomenal. Take it. You need a good PS2 game, to keep those sales. But they said no, they didn't know what to do with it. And the other one was, I think it's called Jeanne d'Arc, as in Joan of Arc, which was the level 5 turn-based kind of Advance Wars Fire Emblem type game. Yeah. And again, I was trying to show it off, and they just looked at me going, "This isn't SingStar." So that never happened either. So I can't claim responsibility for Demon's Souls not making it, but those two I can.
But don't you think it's incredible that saying what you said, and that's it's a definite insight to what was first shown off by From at that point, that it is a really difficult pitch to put across exactly what they were trying to do with the online side of things and with the world. But they had faith in it. It caught fire with gamers. I'd wager that online side of things is possibly going to be the most referred to element from this gen on next gen.
Dude, it already is.
I mean,
it's like Dark Souls. No, it isn't.
Yeah,
so many games. Payday 2 is like Dark Souls. Oh, fuck off. No, it isn't.
No, but I mean, like, you're looking at Destiny seems to lift the online side of things from the Souls games, and there's a lot of other games that seem to be doing the player ghost thing, and the
Zombie U did the messages thing.
It's a fantastic game.
It's a very good game. He used it. Actually, Watch Dogs kind of gets what makes Dark Souls special in that regard. Watch Dogs uses it. Ubisoft knows what to do. Watch Dogs uses it as well with the kind of invasion aspect of it, where you're kind of playing, but you're always online, and people can kind of jump into your game and hack your phone, and you've got to hunt them down before they can basically steal all your goodies. I think that's it. I think taking lessons from Dark Souls in a very kind of spiritual fashion, rather than just trying to recreate its difficulty in its world, that's a much more kind of useful way to go about things. So I don't think anyone would even dare try to recreate Dark Souls.
You don't think it's interesting as well that they've come with this idea that's quite difficult to pitch, and that they've slowly built a fan base that's just growing and growing and becoming more obsessive, and are talking more and are bringing more and more people in, and it's done that, I don't know, almost holistically maybe.
It's basically developed a kind of grassroots movement, which is a very weird thing to say for a game that's made by a relatively big, developer and published by some very large names. But it's kind of had to scrap through on its own merits, and very few games kind of get that chance. There are so many games that get ignored. You look at games like Bulletstorm and Vanquish and things like that are really fucking accomplished in their genres, but they haven't you get the few people like me who will be like, buy Binary Domain, it's brilliant and it's £4 and you should totally play it. But it doesn't have the same legs as Dark Souls. It's those games are great games, but they just don't have the same. They just don't have the same legs in terms of what we've talked about, which is the number of combinations of ways that you can play it and things that you can do. The rest of these games are very kind of linear, straightforward experiences that warrant it, but there's very little to keep people coming back and keep talking about them. And the one thing it does is it shows that people criticize contemporary Japanese games development, and yet that one game alone has made greater strides in the online space than most of what the West has managed collectively for the last kind of 5 years to a decade. And it just also shows that they understand how to do that kind of high fantasy world. Another game that does it very well is Dragon's Dogma. Is Japanese. Both of those games have so much more personality than Skyrim, than anything kind of Bethesda pumps out or anything Blizzard pumps out. I just don't like their attitude to fantasy, and I absolutely love the way the Japanese have taken that kind of Western Dungeons and Dragons mythology and added their kind of general kind of the weird kind of spin that you expect of it, but just absolutely injected it with bags of personality and memorable moments with it.
I know on the point is view piece that you did, you said that that the Souls games have got sort of their feet in the rich heritage of old school game design. At what point when you were playing the game when you were playing Dark Souls, did you start to think, oh, this is reminding me of when I played this when I was a kid, and I remember when I got past this, and at what point did it start to sort of push those buttons, and did that add to how much you were enjoying it in the moment and the now?
I think it was. I don't know if there was a specific moment per se. It was just that kind of sense of discovery that kind of pervades the entire game, and just little things that you catch, and you wonder, did that just happen, or and it's meant to, and that's the effect it's intended to. It's like, did that just happen moment? Or, when you see that, the kind of little glowing frog things that you have to kill really quickly, and you see your first one in the distance, and you're like, what the fuck is that? And then you kind of run over and it vanishes, you're like, what? And then the next time you die, you're like, right, I want to get close, I want to try and hit it this time. And just little bits like that. And that reminded me of, I think one of the things I mentioned in that point of view was, in Ghosts and Goblins, people had worked out that there was a gravestone that you could throw spears at, and if you did it enough times, then a wizard appeared and it turned into a frog.
I remember you saying about Pac-Land as well, yeah.
Oh yeah, Pac-Land, like pushing the fire hydrants and getting help. Yeah. I only discovered that when I started playing it on MAME, let alone playing it back in 1985 in the arcade. All this stuff that is just there, not in plain sight, but it's there, and it just shows the developers are kind of thinking one step ahead of the game. And it's like, don't just assume that what you see is what you get, and that's what evokes classic old school Japanese arcade game design for me. The likes of Bubble Bobble, a game that you basically have to finish in 2-player mode or you don't get the true ending, or you have to find these crystal balls that randomly appear on specific levels, otherwise you don't get the true ending. These really kind of difficult, almost arbitrary sets of rules. And don't forget, these were games that you had to pump 10-20p in for a go.
They were designed for it, weren't they? Yeah.
They were designed for it, but in a clever way, not like fucking Williams, who made the likes of Smash TV and Total Contra, which was designed to gobble your money. The Williams arcade games, you've just made me think of this. Williams arcade games, like NBA Jam, things like this, where it's a paper quarter, they were the equivalent of free-to-play design. People say free-to-play, this is revolutionary. They're just transferring the dearly unfair arcade model that used to exist into the home now. That's all they're doing with free-to-play. And whereas with Japanese, it was about skill. It was about mastering the game properly and learning its secrets and learning its intricacies. And then, you could put 20p in and get your way from start to finish, no questions asked, no unfair difficulty ramping, no AI boost, nothing shitty like that. Just relying entirely on your memory and skill to kind of get through.
It puts me in mind a little bit of there's a piece in the latest Retro Gamer where Paul Davis said that there was a certain arcade machine that he used to love, and he got the game on, I think it was on Mega Drive, and became like amazing at the game on Mega Drive, and then walked into the centre of Manchester, walked up to this coin op, and clocked the game twice on 10p. That to me is a champion moment. That you just need that framed, because that's just gobsmacking. But that's what we do it for. Do
you remember what game it was?
Give me a minute. I'm going to run and get it. Talk amongst yourselves, please.
The only time I've done it really was Cadillacs and Dinosaurs. Do you know that one? It's
I've seen that. Yeah.
Capcom scrolling beat 'em up. And yeah, slightly more lenient than some of the other ones they'd kind of put out. But yeah, I managed to do that, I think, in 20p. That was 2 goes. That felt like a huge achievement. When you realise, there was a time in arcades where people were queuing to play games, and some of these fighters last an hour and a half. It's an hour and a half. You're meant to be just stood there in the arcade trying to battle through these games. So yeah, when you can do that in 1020p, it's like, yeah.
Well, I got a lot of that feeling. I was a bit too young. I was born in '85, so by the time I was kind of old enough to game properly, like the arcades, we didn't really have any around where I was. I didn't really go to them, and I picked up a lot of things like Ghosts and Goblins. I got on the the Capcom classics, like the PSP collection.
Yeah.
Where they just give you 30 old games, and you've got Black Tiger was the one that I really liked.
Oh yeah, brilliant!
I fucking love Black Tiger, and what's the guy with the sword? Had a really slow chop.
Oh, what in the game?
It was like an arcade. It had a really kind of slow 3-frame chop, but it was awesome.
Was it a Capcom one as well?
It might have been, yeah.
Was it Magic Sword or Rastan?
Oh, it's Rastan! Yes, it was fucking Rastan.
Taito.
Just
Taito,
sitting on my damn PSP or on the Sega Mega Drive collections, and just realizing just how hard these things were. I'm thinking, oh my god, if I'd have had to put 20p in every time, my mum would have killed me. She would have actually killed me.
But the other thing you learn is like the checkpointing is brutal. Like Ghosts and Goblins checkpointing is evil. Yeah. And what did I try? I was going to do because Lords of Shadow 2 came out. I was going to try and do I do this unlimited credits, which I haven't done for a while, like when I play old arcade games. And I was going to try and do. There's a Castlevania arcade game, very obscure. I think it's just called Vampire Killer, and you can only put in a certain amount of credits, and you can either choose to stack all those credits up as a kind of a single life, with like 64 energy points, or you can kind of continue and it'll let you kind of checkpoint. But it's something stupid like 3 or 4 credits is all you can have, and that's literally all you have to finish the entire game.
Yeah.
And if you get to a certain point, you're like at the last boss and you're on your last sliver of energy, you die, that's it. You can put in all the money you want, but fuck off. Fuck off and go back to the start.
That, though. I think that's great.
That's mean, man. That's
awesome.
Like so mean.
I found the article.
Go on.
And interestingly, it ties into something that we've spoken about. But the little bit towards the end, it says, "My proudest moment was kind of cheating. I managed to clock Ghouls and Ghosts twice on 1 credit in a massive parlour on the outskirts of Manchester's Piccadilly Gardens. I've been playing the game relentlessly on Mega Drive, so I knew all the patterns better than anything in my life ever." That's a rite of passage, that is.
It's strange. It's also didn't become part of your brain, isn't it? I mean, I can still fire up Sonic 1 on my Master System and do the entire thing in one life without even thinking about it now. Like, it burns in my brain.
It's rote. The entire thing is rote, yeah. Ghouls and Ghosts, man. I mean, it's a sign of how good a conversion that was on the Mega Drive, that you could just make the leap to the arcade, and it's a 1-for-1, because it was so often the case I was playing shitty conversion of the Spectrum and stuff that bore very little resemblance to the source material. But yeah, and Ghouls and Ghosts as well. Fuck, that's nails, man. I know Paul, yeah. He used to do some like writing for Xbox. I saw him at a few events, and I used to say him opposite. Oh, I used to love you and like Mean Machines and CVG and stuff, you know. But he's just a really, really nice guy, and it's like, yeah, he was properly hardcore back in the day, man. Like, I can never claim that I'd had the patience to get through Ghouls and Ghosts. The worst one was the SNES one, because you had to finish it twice. You got to the end, and you thought, oh my god, I've made it to the end of Super Ghouls and Ghosts. And it would say, oh, you don't have the right armor to save the princess. You've got to get this magical armor. And you can't get the armor on the first playthrough. You have to do the second playthrough to get the armor. Not only do you have to get the special armor, which basically involves not taking a hit because you have to get the special gold armor, which is like your second level of armor. You then have to get to the last boss and beat the last boss without losing the gold armor at any point. Like, come on! And that game's got limited credits as well. You can't just like keep continuing your way through the game and hope to do it. Fucking nightmare, man. You know, Dark Souls, piece of piss.
I my own sort of Manchester story, just sort of tying in a little bit to Paul's, is that my mum's side of the family from up there, so I used to go up there quite a lot. And whenever I went up, I had to go to Central Street in Manchester, because I knew that's where Ocean Software were. And
nice.
I just had to stand outside and just look at it. And it just felt like all of these people like Dave Collier and John Megan and all these guys that were doing the home conversions. You know, even though it was a weekend when I was there, it was like from Monday to Friday, or you know, they were probably down in the basement or whatever working anyway. But it just felt spectacular. It felt like I was standing outside Santa's grotto, and it just stopped me in my tracks. And it was
that's where the magic was happening, man.
Yeah, big time. I was such a nerd as well.
Oh man, Ocean did some incredible conversions. I loved Cabal was one of my favourite conversions they did.
Yeah, so it was a good game, that was. They often would dig up arcade machines. When I heard that Ocean were converting something, I'd go hunting for arcade machines in the summer in Skeggy.
Nice.
And would try and find them, and when everybody else was jumping up and down about Afterburner, and then I managed to find a cabinet with Typhoon, which was like Afterburner, but you going down through the clouds and then cut to a vertically scrolling shoot 'em up like Tiger Heli. That was a belting game, and that was one of those where it's like, when is it coming out? And whereas sort of lots of kids might be looking forward to Christmas. I might have had like October the 12th on my calendar, putting £1 a week of my paper round money into like a array of those NatWest pigs, and it was just like, right, you're for Typhoon, and you're going to be for Whizball, and you're going to be... Yeah, it was a little bit like that.
Did that Typhoon game have an awesome hydraulic cabinet like Afterburner as well?
It didn't. It was just a stand-up cabinet, but I love Tiger Heli anyway and things like UN Squadron. So to go from it threw me like the fact that your plane took off at the start, went right up into the clouds, and then when the game kicked in, you were going down through the clouds with these spiraling fighter jets coming up towards you, and
Wicked.
The fact that there was no hydraulic cabinet didn't really bother me, because it was like, I'm falling through the sky and this is ace. And I knew that I'd even nerd out about who was doing the conversions and stuff.
It was important. It was important because you knew some of them were just going to do an absolute duffer, but there was legends who kind of, even though they couldn't do a perfect conversion, they knew they got the element of the game, the fundamental elements of the game right. I was the same. I was like, who's on this one? Who's on this one?
It was even things like when I think it was Dave Collier at Ocean was the guy that figured out that if you did a mode 3. I think it was mode 3 where the Commodore could basically draw really detailed sprites like a spectrum, and you overlaid those over the top of regular sprites. You'd have less sprites on screen, but essentially you'd have a colourful spectrum graphic. And when he figured that out, and you were looking at it, it's like, oh my god. And I saw it recently where they said that entire flight simulators used to be coded in less space than it takes to hold the Google logo.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Elite, the original Elite, I think is something crazy like 4K or something stupid like that. It's got millions of planets in it. It's just, it was all about efficiency then. It was all about focusing on what was important. Kind of going full circle. That's why I really like Dark Souls, because that's what it does. Is it favors all the elements of games that I think are genuinely important. Things that are, not increasingly being lost, that are kind of have always been lost on the wider audience. Those who are fixated on the next kind of technological progression before they've really had a chance to understand what's possible with the technology that's on hand right now. What kind of artistry that affords. One thing you can't fault Dark Souls for is ambition as well. It's like, rather than sacrifice their vision for certain areas, they've just gone, fuck it, the frame rate's going to be 5 frames a second, and you're going to have to deal with that.
Yeah. But give me ambition.
I think.
Give me ambition any stage of the week over like, I don't think we can do that. It's like, just show me what you're doing. I can accept it if what you're throwing is at me.
Shadow of the Colossus is another brilliant example. That game runs on average probably about 15-20 frames a second most of the time, but it doesn't matter because it's beautiful and it just tells an amazing story, and it tells an amazing story through its battles. But the fact that it's slightly jerky, you can imagine that actually put some people off buying it. Or it would in this day and age. They'd be like, oh, well, that's not in 1080p at 60 frames a second. I'm not going to play Shadow of the Colossus.
But don't you think sometimes that your own state of mind can kind of push beyond that, or invent rules that tie it in? Or I always think with Demon Souls especially, but it was there in Dark Souls with the ragdoll physics once things were dead. To me, I know a good few people sort of laughed at that or thought it was crap. For me, it was almost like, well, the soul's been swiped out of them, and I find that genuinely terrifying that they're essentially like these little dolls.
Oh, I found it.
Sometimes you return to an area, and it's almost as if something was playing with the dolls and has just thrown them down again and run off really quickly.
Yeah, I bust out. I'm one of the people that finds that absolutely hilarious and sees how far I can take somebody.
Oh yeah, me too. They can drag them along by their leg or whatever. It's hooked in yours.
We're going on a journey.
I put that entirely down to the fact that Japanese developers just really don't know how to use Havoc properly. Like every game I've played, they've used Havoc. They don't got a clue. Like it's so funny. It's like we need some boxes to fall over. Havoc, put Havoc in, and it's just watching it go haywire. But yeah, I mean, Dark Souls is. It's kind of romantic to think of it like that. I think there's a romance to thinking of it like that. That once the souls have left the body, then they are these kind of just toys. But nah, they're just hilarious. Ragdolls just like flinging themselves off cliffs, and there's nothing funnier than watching something alive flinging itself off a.
Now, if you're talking about things going off cliffs, I'm always going to go back to Dragon's Dogma and think of how it never gets old to throw bunnies off cliffs.
No,
never gets old.
Just throwing things generally, that game is brilliant. But yeah, that satisfaction in Dark Souls when you see your souls count go up and you're like, why? Oh, something just jumped off a cliff. Fantastic.
Yeah, but you also got that thing where you adding to the extra tension and momentum when you are carrying a load of souls and you're thinking, should I go back? Should I do something with these? Nah, press on.
Should I cash in? Yeah, oh man.
It reminds me in that touch of the original Tomb Raider, because those save crystals were so far apart that when you did get to a new area and you hadn't seen a save crystal for a while, tension.
And typewriter ribbons in Resident Evil.
Yeah.
Especially Resident Evil 2, because if you wanted to get an A rank, I think you could only save 3 times. And so you had to choose your moments really carefully. And yeah, that was very much like the Souls. It was like it wasn't having limited ribbons because you just amass shit tons, but you just be like, fuck, if I'm going to use it now, I've got to make pretty damn sure that I'm going to make it through the next 2 hours alive. Otherwise, I'm going to be massively pissed off when I can't.
It's like a quick 2 hours. Like you've got to be pelting your way through it as well, haven't you? Like you can't afford to fuck up and run around going, where does this key go? I'm just going to put this back in the box.
You've got to know that game down. It's a sub 3 hour finish, is it? Or sub 2.5?
Oh, it's like that, yeah.
It was whatever you needed to do to unlock the hunk and the tofu missions and stuff. And God, man,
I never that was close. That was like 12. I never even got close.
No, that was my Ghouls and Ghosts actually. I knew how to run past every single zombie in the opening section of the game, just so you catch the zombie of, I think it's Brad. If you get there any other time, he's dead. But if you get there and you run past all the zombies, you do something else. Yeah, he's alive, and you have to gun him down. It's like awesome little touches like that. That's another example of brilliant Japanese game design. Secrets like that. There's an item in Resident Evil 2 that you can look at 50 times, and the 50th time you looked at it, you get a photo of the stars team together.
What? Isn't it like Rebecca Chambers in like a sports outfit or something?
Yeah, I thought it was like maybe it is, maybe it's.
I was really disappointed. I thought it was going to be good, and it was Rebecca Chambers. Like my least. She's the Yuffie of Resident Evil. Like
she is.
I fucking hate her.
Absolutely is. I totally agree with that.
Playing fucking pianos with her elbows. Stop it. It's not cute. It's not funny. You've got more serious things to be doing.
So I know you mentioned that you fell in love with the life hunt side in Dark Souls. What other kind of build were you running with? Are you the sort of person that will tank up and hide behind a fire door, or you like to be like light and bounce around, or what's the feel that you found as you went through Dark Souls, and how is that reacting to Dark Souls 2?
The further I got there, the kind of heavier I made myself. I found, like, towards the end, when you're fighting the Four Kings stuff, it just pays to have the most powerful weapon possible, the heaviest armor, and, like, mobility can take a running jump. But earlier on, like, when I went back to the Asylum, and you have to fight the demon, or a variant of it, I did that naked.
What?
Because... Yeah, I did it naked because it just gave me maximum mobility to just sneak around the back of him.
Of course, yeah.
And as long as you stay around the back of him, you run away when he does his area attack. You're basically untouchable. You just need to get past him when you do that. When the floor collapses, and the moment you've done that, he can't stop you because you're just swift, absolutely swift. So yeah, my build just kept switching up. Sometimes. I was grateful that I started as a pyromancer. That was a big thing. So I was heavy on endurance, heavy on dex, and actually because I spent most of my game looking at great shields and whacking swords and going, I'm never going to be able to use any of those. I've started Dark Souls 2 with, I think, a warrior build. It's something that favours strength anyway. Like I'm gearing towards basically using big fuck off weapons.
Uh-huh.
I've done something similar. Like I played it kind of similar as well. Like I tend to go quite dex and pyro heavy usually, and I've resolved in 2. I mean, I have finished now, but trying to not to use stuff that I've used before.
Yeah,
like, trying to play it differently. And then me and CJ have just started our bro run, which we'll discuss on a later show.
Are you one broing?
I don't know. I haven't finished my Dark Souls 1 bro yet. We kind of gutted out in Anor Londo, didn't we?
We did, but it was jumping back to Dark Souls and the one bro run. You kind of realise that as much as I threw stats into trying to have the strength or the dex to use certain swords or shields or whatever, that the one bro run encourages you to just throw everything into Titanite shards and just boosting up your armor and boosting up the weapon that you got, and it makes you kind of realise that you've been playing the game wrong. And the strange thing is that you just think, is this a mechanic they were mindful of? And are they just playing into the fact that people when they play these games will level up all the things that you normally do in an RPG. Whereas there's kind of another way of doing it. I wonder how much was grand design or how much they learned from players.
I think it's almost entirely deliberate, because when you play a traditional kind of turn-based RPG, if you don't level up, you don't win. It's a mathematical impossibility. With Dark Souls, you've got the added factor of skill, of genuine skill. Is like if you play the game right, you can have the most basic weapon, but if you know how to give things the runaround, you can still win. So you're
leveling up yourself, your skills, rather than your stuff. Like you're leveling up. You're getting better at it. You're not just upping your numbers. You're getting more skillful at the game. And
but that's it. And leveling up in Dark Souls is offsetting your skill level. Like you're only building this stuff up because you don't feel capable of doing it at your level. You're making life easier for yourself.
Yeah.
Leveling up isn't essential. It's not essential. The fact that people can do one bros proves that. But, I say that, I'm never going to do it. I'm never going to attempt it because no, just basically.
This is going to sound like normal, like the standard kind of platitude you hear, but honestly, it's not actually that bad.
Dan, this is one of those moments where you're setting yourself up for a Sean Connery never say never again moment, where there'll be a tweet that's going like, started a one bro run on Dark Souls. See your timeline pull up with
No.
Oh yeah, I can't use bows and arrows. Fuck.
Yeah, but the weird thing is that one of the weapons that you can use, I think it was Epic Namebro when he did a run testing the best strength weapons. And not just testing the amount of damage that they did, but the amount of swings that you could get in the same amount of time. And one of the best strength weapons in the game is the reinforced club that you get at the first merchant, and can be held by a one bro. So level that up to a +10, you are laughing, sir.
Wow.
Not to mention the R2 attack is it's glorious.
Yeah. It's what we labelled the bunny smash, because you jump up in the air and then just smack down on something, and it's just wonderful. There's a degree of Elmer Fudd to it. Like, I'm gonna catch me a wabbit.
It's like a jumping R1, but you can do it whenever you feel like without having to do some gymnastics. It's awesome. It was that first time me and you were running around in Darkroot Garden, wasn't it? And you were out to that big stone knight and just went bonk.
Bosh. Yeah.
And it just went down in
Take
one hit.
Back to the baseball.
Yeah.
So do you play it co-op? I mean, how do you kind of coordinate a co-op game in Dark Souls?
In Dark Souls 1, we because my first run is what we did for the whole the podcast, we did as I was going through. CJ was my mentor, and we'd go through, and what we'd do is we'd find a place to meet up that wasn't usual, so we wouldn't put it right by the bonfire. Like in Anor Londo, we'd go down the stairs and just go in that little kind of tiny little tunnel underneath the first sort of stairs you go down. And we'd sort of meet up around there or go around a corner. And inevitably put your sign down, then run around for usually anywhere between a minute to about 20 minutes trying to find each other.
The way
No
it was,
joke.
it was peer to peer, wasn't it?
Yeah, half the game was us running around trying to meet up. Like, that's part of Dark Souls 1 for me. Is running around going, where are you? I can't see it.
But we'd be on Skype at the same time and just sort of chatting sort of generally and stuff. But the way that we initially started this podcast was I was experienced at the games and Paddy had come to them sort of new, and we just sort of collided there. But we found with Dark Souls 2, because Pad had that for review and I had to wait for the retail copy, the sort of roles have reversed a little bit, and I haven't finished it yet.
I know everything.
I think I'm the only person that hasn't finished it. I think there was a guy from Destructoid that finished it in 35 hours. I've seen a speedrun that's done it in 1 hour and 15 minutes. And I think I'm on about 90 hours now. And a lot of that has been kind of jumping into other people's games and sort of building up souls to level myself up. But I was watching some of Matt Lee's videos the other day, and he was having really good fun with the Rat Bro Covenant. Haven't been anywhere near that, and I keep seeing people in gear that I've not got or gestures that I've not seen, and I've gone back to earlier areas and combed them through and have found tons more. And you know what? I'm not in any rush to finish it because I'm having that much fun. And if you're packing that much content in, thank you very much.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, that was the Dark Souls. I was in no rush to finish it. There were so many bits where it was like, well, this bit's totally optional. You don't have to do it. I was like, I want to see everything. I want to explore every corner of this world and find everything it has to offer, because it's like, if I don't see it, I feel like I'm cheating myself.
Yeah, there are no optional bosses. You can say it's optional. It's not optional. You have to do it. It's not just shoot this thing with a bigger number than the other thing. It's its own fight. It's the reason whenever I do a run of Dark, I always do the DLC as well. I never skip the DLC. I did a two-handed run a while ago where I no shield, big sword. And
oh my god!
Yeah, equal parts. You feel like an absolute god, and then maybe sort of half the time you feel like a god, half the time arse-opening terror.
Did you play the DLC, Dan?
I've not. No. I haven't played Prepare to Die. No, I've basically just had that copy from what was work years ago. So I never got Prepare to Die or anything. So
it's a little bit special.
Is it really?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, you have to start the game again to get it, because it's sewn seamlessly into the world. But it takes, there's the stuff that's spoken about Artorias, that he traversed the abyss, and obviously you use his ring and you go down into the abyss. It follows the journey of Artorias, where you go back into the past and you find the man himself. You find this lost town of Ulasil, and it's basically the pretty pink bow on Dark Souls. It ties tons of the story together. It's absolutely exceptional, and as far as I've been able to ascertain, cut it from the original game because they didn't feel it was ready yet, and immediately after it had shipped, started working on it. And the point where they went, right, this is working properly, that's when they announced the PC version would have it, and then that they'd be putting it out with the consoles with Prepare to Die. But it's astonishing. It's absolutely astonishing.
3 of the most stonking boss fights in the game as well. Like, they test you in all sorts of ways. Yeah.
Seriously, Artorias is just phenomenal. The whole thing that it does with the lore in the DLC is just incredible. It makes the game even more essential, and genuinely moves me.
So if I've only just started a new game plus, and if I was to get the DLC, it wouldn't add it to that.
No.
Wait,
maybe. They even did.
Hang on, no. I think if you start a new game plus and if you buy the DLC, I think it will plug into it. I think.
Will it? I don't
know. Is it access? Yeah. Am I right in thinking it's kind of access near where the
Hydra?
Where the Hydra, yeah, where you find the golden golem.
Yeah.
It's just a little bit further from that. But when they released the Prepare to Die edition, it wouldn't even read the Dark Souls save.
Oh.
It's only reading sort of it was only creating brand new save files. So part of me was like, what? And then that just fizzed into, all right then. Oh, you Dark Souls, like giving it a little bit of a nuggy. But
Guess I'll start again then.
it is absolutely incredible.
Oh, God damn.
The way it then links back to the main game, there's little things that once they're in your mind, that just things start. I can't even put it into words because I don't want to spoil it, but I think you'd love it.
Cool. All right. Maybe I will give that a go then. Hopefully it'll plug into my, powerful New Game Plus character. Like, oh God!
But then you'll be fighting all these extra bosses at New Game Plus levels. So good luck with that.
Oh, fuck. You make a very valid point. Holy shit! What to do? Oh God!
Run. You'll be there in an hour. It's fine.
Oh, it's true.
I think that's a good point to close on though. But thank you very much for coming on, Dan. It's been a real pleasure to have you on, and I listened to Explosive Alan as you know, so it's nice to have you back on here. And of course, you've got to name this podcast as well, because we named one of yours.
Oh, you did. Which episode did you name now?
It was quite a literary name as well. It was a play.
Oh, was it Swallows and Allens?
Yeah, Swallows and Allensons. Yeah, that was.
Allens, yes, that was the one. Cool. All right then. Yeah, I'll have to come up with a name for it. I can't do it on the spot though.
Pressure. This is the best of the night. Your good lady will be like, Danny, coming to bed. You'll be like, not yet. No,
not yet. I must think of a name.
So,
a name.
If anyone hasn't listened to Explosive Alan or hasn't seen things that you do, where can they find you? And do you want to share a little bit about what you do before we go?
Yeah, I mean, we've become quite a strange little company in a way. Explosive Alan itself is now really a kind of a professional video production agency. My other two business partners, Ash and Gareth, are right now in Chicago at a Watch Dogs event, providing the official video coverage for the PlayStation blog. I am sat in my living room in Penge, not doing that. So you can see where I factor on the pecking order. But what I like to do is, because Explosive Alan started because we had a great deal of community support from our Inside Xbox days, and I just feel duty bound to just kind of keep rewarding those people that stuck with us. I love making the stuff that I do. Without my talented video people, it all looks massively shit, but that's fine. But yeah, you can check us out on YouTube at youtube.com/explosivealan. You'll see a couple of regular shows that we do on there, including my video blog that CJ's already mentioned, Point is View. And also highly recommend listening to our podcast, as well as Twin Humanities, obviously, the Explosive Alan podcast, where we just kind of cover off news and what we're playing and do challenges and have a big old serious chat at the end. And we very much welcome listener involvement, from, as you said, suggesting the title, to giving us questions to answer, to providing your opinions for the debate at the end of the show. And also, I tend to sing most of the opening themes.
Also, I'd recommend Zeitgeist as well on Monday night.
Thank you. Yeah,
I tried to get along for most of those and pitch in. So
yeah, Zeitgeist is a new kind of live Google Hangout show. We're just kind of experimenting with Google Hangouts. It's a really cool tool because you can stream directly to YouTube, and as soon as it's over, it then archives it in YouTube. And there's a Q&A functionality in that, so if you kind of get on Google Hangouts, you can post questions to us, and we'll answer those live on the show as well. So it's kind of like, it's a bit like a much messier version of Sent You a Message for people who watch Inside Xbox. A much messier version, far less preparation.
No, it's good to sort of get the feedback, and even there's even been points where the show's been going on and I've responded to something that other people have said, and there's been little chats in the comments. And I know the other week you were like, we haven't talked about Dragon's Dogma, and there was like me and this other guy that were like battering back and forth about Dragon's Dogmas from there. So it's a cool back and forth. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of, it doesn't function quite like a chat room would on a lot of live streams. It's a lot less hectic. I think, well, one, I can put that down to the fact that we haven't got many viewers, but two, because it's more geared towards questions, it actually means that the stuff that's useful for the show kind of gets filtered through, and you get less of that kind of, if you've ever watched like a Ustream or anything like that, you just get this like torrent of inane chatter, and whichever poor bastard has to try and moderate that or kind of pick out questions. We don't have a kind of producer who's sat at one side doing that for us. We're kind of having the conversation at the same time, trying to moderate it, exactly the same time. So it's it keeps us on our toes, and we have a really good time doing it. So yeah, if more people check that out as well and get involved, the more the merrier, basically.
Well, please do, because like I say, I listen to Explosive Alan and pitch into a few of these things, so I'm a fan. So I couldn't recommend it more. So
no worries.
Well, thank you very much again, Dan. And,
no worries. It's been a pleasure to kind of bend your ears about Dark Souls, because the general response I get from people in the office is just eyes rolling deeply into the back of the head, Undertaker style. So, to be able to have this kind of self-indulgent hour and a half of just going to town on like everything I've kind of had stored up with people who actually understand why it's so good has actually been very very cathartic for me.
Well, likewise, you're more than welcome to come back on once you've delved into Dark Souls 2, or you've gone back to Demon Souls, or you've done the DLC. We have avenues to progress from here. So
many avenues.
It's an open invitation.
Fantastic.
Speaking of avenues, before we close up, I feel like I should do a very, very, very quick plug for something we did last week on our YouTube channel. That if you haven't watched it, you probably should, because my mum is proud of it. Because we missed the show last week, and it was Easter. So I thought, off the suggestion of my other half, we should do some art and crafts. So we made some chocolatey Dark Souls Easter crow's nests that you put smooth silky stones in, and weapons come out of them. And I told my mum I've made a cooking video on YouTube, and she was so proud. So you should all go watch that. And
Does she let you back in the house now?
Yeah, it's just about.
All forgiven.
All's forgiven, finally. So yeah, Craft Souls. Check it out.
Right, well, thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much, Dan, again, and we'll see you all again soon.
Cheers, bye.
Bye, everyone.